They say you can't put a price on peace of mind, but I did. £220,000, to be exact. And I watched it disappear into concrete that never got poured, permits that never existed, and promises that evaporated like morning fog over Manila Bay. If these confessions help you see the warning signs we missed, please like this video and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. This story was shared with us by one of our viewers. He's asked us to protect his identity, but he wants other expats to hear what he learned the hard way. I landed at Ninoy Aquino International Airport on a Tuesday morning in March, my third trip to Manila in 8 months. This time felt different. This time, I wasn't just visiting. I was carrying architectural plans rolled up in a cardboard tube, a cashier's check for £75,000 converted to pesos, and the kind of hope that makes a 67-year-old man feel young again. The humidity hit me the moment I stepped off the plane, thick and warm, wrapping around me like a blanket I'd missed. I'd been video calling Janina every single night for a year, ever since we matched on that dating app. And now I was here to build our future, actually build it, with my own money, my own hands if necessary, my own dreams that had been locked away in a Croydon flat for 40 years while I sold insurance policies and waited for life to start. She was waiting for me outside arrivals in a black BMW that I later learned belonged to her cousin's friend's boss. She looked even more beautiful than I remembered from my last visit in December. 29 years old, with long dark hair that fell past her shoulders and a smile that made my chest ache. She kissed me right there in front of everyone, her arms around my neck, and I felt like I'd won something, like I'd finally gotten it right. "I missed you so much," she whispered against my ear, and I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. We loaded my bags into the trunk and she drove us south toward Cavite, toward the property where we were going to build our resort. She held my hand over the gear shift, her fingers small and warm in mine, and talked about everything we were going to create together. "Beachfront cottages," she said. "A restaurant serving fresh seafood, maybe a dive shop for tourists." Her voice was bright with possibility, with plans I'd helped her dream up over 1,000 late-night video calls. I had the architectural drawings in my bag, sketches I'd paid a firm in London to draft based on her descriptions. 6 cottages to start, each one with a view of the ocean, each one a piece of the life we were building. My pension fund was in my backpack, converted to cash and check, the weight of it pressing against my spine. Everything I'd saved in 40 years, everything I'd worked for. I kept touching the bag to make sure it was still there, my fingers finding the zipper, checking, rechecking. Janina noticed and laughed. "Relax, my love," she said. "Nobody's going to take it. We're safe here." I tried to relax. I tried to ignore the small voice in the back of my mind asking why the property papers were still in her cousin Miguel's name, why the ownership transfer hadn't gone through yet. She'd explained it to me a dozen times over video call. Foreign ownership laws in the Philippines are complicated. There are restrictions, legal hoops, constitutional limitations on land ownership by non-Filipinos. "It's easier this way," she'd said. "Safer, just temporarily." Her lawyer was handling everything. I'd researched it myself, late at night in my daughter's spare room in London, reading forum posts from other expats who'd navigated the same maze. The information matched what Janina told me, so I pushed the doubt down. I was in love. I was finally doing something bold, something that mattered, something other than sitting behind a desk processing claims and wondering if this was all there was. The drive took 2 hours through traffic that moved like molasses, past jeepneys packed with people and street vendors selling fruit from wooden carts. Janina pointed out landmarks, told me stories about growing up in Cebu, about moving to Manila for work, about how hard it had been before she met me. "You changed everything," she said, squeezing my hand. "You gave me hope again." I looked at her profile as she drove, the way the sunlight caught her cheekbones, and I felt something close to joy. This was real. This was happening. I was building a life with someone who loved me, who needed me, who saw me as more than just a pension and a flat in Croydon. When we finally turned off the main road and drove down a narrow dirt path lined with coconut palms, my heart was racing. This was it, our land, our future. She parked the car and turned to me with that smile, that beautiful smile that made me forget every reasonable question I should have been asking. "Ready to see our dream?" she asked. I nodded. I was ready. I was so ready I couldn't see what was right in front of me. The property wasn't beachfront. That was the first thing I noticed. We were standing in the middle of 2 kilometers of red mud and scattered palms, surrounded by half-built concrete houses with rebar sticking out of their roofs like broken teeth. I could hear traffic from the highway. I could smell burning garbage. I couldn't see the ocean. Janina must have seen my face change because she immediately took my arm and pointed toward a narrow path cutting between 2 houses. "The beach access is just through there," she said quickly. "It's a 5-minute walk. Everyone here uses that path. It's completely legal." I looked at the path. It was maybe 2 feet wide, choked with weeds, disappearing into shadows between the houses. This wasn't what I'd imagined. This wasn't what she'd described. But she was already walking me toward the center of the plot, toward wooden stakes driven into the ground, with orange string connecting them, marking out the foundation. "Miguel has been working for weeks," she said, "getting everything ready. The permits are almost done. Look, you can see where the first cottage will go." I tried to hide my disappointment. I tried to focus on the stakes, on the potential, on the fact that everything starts somewhere. Raw land becomes something beautiful. That's how development works. I knew that. I'd watched enough property shows on television. But this didn't look like the photos she'd sent me. Those had shown ocean views, palm trees, golden sand. This looked like a construction site that someone had abandoned and forgotten. "Colin, this is Miguel." I turned and saw a man walking toward us from a small nipper hut at the edge of the property. He was maybe 40, compact and muscular, with a firm handshake and a folder tucked under his arm. "Miguel is my cousin," Janina said. "He's the construction foreman. He's been managing everything." Miguel smiled at me with too many teeth and opened the folder. Inside were receipts, permits, official-looking documents with stamps and signatures I couldn't read. Building permits, pending approval, cement orders, lumber quotes, labor contracts with names and thumbprints. Everything looked legitimate. Everything looked real. He spoke confidently, his English clear and precise, about timelines and materials and local regulations. 6 months to complete first phase, he said, tapping a receipt. Maybe 5 if weather cooperates. I have good crew. Experienced men. I asked about the ownership transfer, trying to sound casual, trying not to seem like I didn't trust them. Janina touched my arm gently, her fingers light on my wrist. "My lawyer is handling it, remember? It's complicated because you're a foreigner, but it's safer this way for now. Once the resort is built and operating, the paperwork will be easier. It's how everyone does it here." I remembered reading about this. The constitutional restrictions, the need for Filipino partners or corporations, the legal complications. It made sense. I nodded. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? She'd never given me a reason not to. That night, we stayed in the small apartment she rented in Bacoor, a 1-bedroom place with thin walls and a window unit that rattled when it ran. She curled against me in the darkness, her head on my chest, and whispered the words I'd been waiting to hear. "I've never felt this safe with anyone." I held her and stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of what we were building together. The next morning, I signed the first construction contract. Miguel spread it out on Janina's kitchen table, showing me where to initial, where to sign, explaining each clause in patient detail. I transferred £75,000 into the account he specified. He promised the work would start Monday. He shook my hand and called me "Sir," and told me I was making a good investment. I believed him. I flew back to London 2 days later, my head full of plans and timelines and blueprints. I'd sold my flat in Croydon to fund this project. Everything I owned fit into 3 suitcases now, stored in my daughter Sarah's spare room in Watford. I was living with her temporarily, sleeping in a room with wallpaper covered in tiny flowers, waking up to the sound of my grandchildren fighting over breakfast. Sarah asked me questions I didn't want to answer. Why was I sending all my money to the Philippines? Had I met Janina's family? Had I verified the property ownership? Had I consulted a lawyer? I showed her the photos Janina sent me every few days. Workers mixing cement in a rusty drum, rebar frames going up against a cloudy sky. Miguel standing beside a concrete mixer with his thumbs up, grinning. Sarah looked at the photos and didn't say anything, but her face said everything. I stopped showing her after that. I called Janina every morning before she went to bed. The time difference meaning I caught her late at night. Her voice sleepy and soft. She sounded stressed sometimes. The permits were taking longer than expected. The barangay captain needed processing fees. Standard procedure, she said. Everyone pays them. It's just how things work here. Miguel needed another £15,000 for materials. The cement supplier wouldn't deliver without a deposit. The lumber yard required payment up front. I wired the money. What else could I do? We were too far in to stop now. I booked another flight for December, counting down the days like a teenager, watching the construction progress in the photos she sent. By the time I landed in Manila again, 2 months had passed, and I was expecting to see walls, roofs, the skeleton of our dream taking shape. Janina picked me up at the airport in the same borrowed BMW, but something was different. She looked tired, thinner. She kissed me, but her mind was somewhere else. We drove to the property in silence, my questions hanging in the air between us, unasked. When we arrived, the site looked exactly the same as it had in September. The rebar frames were there, but they'd rusted. There was no concrete foundation, just wooden stakes and mud, and that same overgrown grass. I stood there, staring at it, my brain trying to reconcile what I was seeing with the photos she'd sent, with the progress reports Miguel had given me over the phone. "Where are the walls?" I finally asked. Miguel appeared from the nipa hut, like he'd been waiting for the question. He launched into an explanation about heavy rain, about flooding, about setbacks with suppliers and permits and local regulations. "We had big typhoon in October," he said, gesturing at the mud. "Everything delayed, but we're back on track now. You'll see. 2 weeks. Big progress." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. I'd already sent £90,000. I walked the property alone while Janina and Miguel talked in rapid Cebuano, their voices low and urgent. I couldn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. There was frustration there. Secrets. Things they weren't telling me. I stood at the edge of the plot and looked toward where the beach was supposed to be, that narrow path between the houses, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Fear, maybe, or the first whisper of truth trying to break through my denial. That night, Janina cried in the apartment. She said Miguel was family. She had to trust him. She couldn't accuse him of anything without proof. I held her and told her it was okay. We'd figure it out. We'd make it work. I meant it. I still believed we could fix this. I still believed in us. I was back in London for 3 weeks before the calls started coming at odd hours. 2 in the morning, 3, 4. Janina's voice on the other end, panicked, crying. The construction had stopped completely. Miguel said the workers had walked off the job. Someone had stolen the cash meant for their wages. She needed £20,000 immediately or we'd lose everything. I sat on the edge of the bed in Sarah's spare room, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to Janina sob. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed, her face hard in the dim light from the hallway. "Don't," she said. Just that one word. Don't. But Janina was telling me her family blamed her, that she was humiliated, that she was losing face in her community. "If you love me," she said, her voice breaking, "you'll help me fix this. Please. I'm begging you." I transferred the money. I didn't look at Sarah. I booked another flight for January. When I arrived this time, Janina wasn't at the airport. I called her number, and it went straight to voicemail. I called again an hour later. Nothing. I took a taxi to her apartment in Bacoor and she wasn't there. The landlord said she'd left that morning, didn't say where she was going. I sat on the steps outside the building with my suitcase and my phone and a creeping sense of dread that felt like drowning. 6 hours later, she finally answered. "Colin, thank God. There was an emergency. My aunt, Tita Nora, she had a heart attack. I'm at the hospital in Las Piñas." I took another taxi to the hospital, my hands shaking, telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. that I was being paranoid, that everything was fine. Tita Nora was sitting up in bed eating lugar when I found her room. She looked confused when I asked if she was okay. "Heart attack," she said. No, just check-up. Routine." Janina wasn't there. I walked through the hospital looking for her, checking waiting rooms and hallways and the cafeteria. Nothing. I called her phone. Voicemail. I took a taxi to the places I knew she went. Her aunt's house, the market in Bacoor, the church where she said she prayed every Sunday. I found her at a shopping mall in Alabang at 9 o'clock that night. She was with two women I'd never met, laughing, carrying shopping bags from stores I couldn't afford. She looked surprised when she saw me walking toward her. Actually, surprised. Like she'd forgotten I was in the country. "Colin," she said, "I thought you were at the apartment." "I was at the hospital," I said, "looking for you." She introduced me to the women, cousins or friends or something. I wasn't listening. She said she'd needed to clear her head, that the stress had been unbearable, that she hadn't meant to worry me. We took a taxi back to her apartment in silence. She barely spoke. She undressed and got into bed and turned away from me, her back a wall I couldn't climb. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, feeling the space between us grow wider with every passing hour. In the morning, I asked to see the property again. She made excuses. The roads were flooded from rain. Miguel was out of town. It wasn't a good time. I rented a car and drove there myself. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Without her explanations, without Miguel's folders full of fake receipts. The site was abandoned. Completely abandoned. No workers, no materials, no sign that anyone had been there in months. Just overgrown grass and weeds growing through the rusted rebar and mud baked hard under the January sun. I took photos with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I had to steady them against my chest. I sat in the rental car for an hour, maybe longer, trying to make sense of it, trying to understand how I'd been so stupid. £110,000, gone, vanished into a property that didn't exist, into permits that were never real, into the promises of a woman I'd thought loved me. When I confronted her that night, she turned it around on me so fast I didn't see it coming. "You don't trust me," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "You think you're better than my family. You think because you're British, because you have money, that you can look down on us." "That's not what this is," I said. The property is fine." Miguel explained everything. There were delays. You know, there were delays. "There's been no progress in 4 months, Janina. Nothing. It looks abandoned." She cried so hard she vomited into the kitchen sink. I stood there watching her, feeling like the villain in a story I didn't understand. She said Miguel would explain everything. There'd been a misunderstanding. I was jumping to conclusions. We needed to talk to him together, calmly, like adults. We met Miguel the next day at a cafe in Makati, one of those expensive places with air conditioning and leather booths. He brought another folder, thicker this time, stuffed with more receipts and documents and papers covered in stamps I couldn't read. He explained that the funds had been mismanaged by a subcontractor who'd disappeared. He'd filed a police report. He showed me a photocopy of it, official letterhead, case numbers, everything. It looked real. Everything always looked real. "I'm working to fix it," Miguel said. "But I need capital to restart. £30,000. That's all. Then we're back on schedule." I said no. For the first time since this whole thing started, I refused. Miguel's face didn't change. He just closed the folder, stood up, shook my hand with a grip that felt like a threat, and left. Janina sat across from me in the booth and didn't say a word. She didn't defend me. She didn't argue with Miguel. She just sat there looking at her phone, her face blank, like I was a stranger she'd been forced to have coffee with. We went back to her apartment and she packed a bag. She said she was going to stay with Tita Nora for a few days. She needed space to think. I watched her leave and I knew. I knew it was over. I knew I'd lost everything. I just didn't want to admit it yet. I found a lawyer through Barry. a British expat I'd connected with in an online forum about retiring in the Philippines. Barry had been living in Manila for 15 years, married to a Filipina, running a small export business. He'd warned me months ago to be careful, to get everything verified, to use a lawyer from the start. I hadn't listened. The lawyer's office was in a building near Quiapo, 3 floors up, no elevator, the kind of place that made you question whether you were making another mistake. His name was Ati. Reyes and he had kind eyes and a tired voice that suggested he'd seen this story 100 times before. I gave him everything. The contracts, the receipts, the bank transfer records, the photos of the empty property. He spread them across his desk and studied them in silence for 20 minutes, while I sat there sweating in a plastic chair. When he finally looked up, his face told me everything I needed to know. "None of these documents are real," he said quietly. "The permits are forgeries. The construction contracts are templates. You can download them from the internet. These signatures don't match any government records. The land itself is under legal dispute. It's owned by a family trust that never authorized development." I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. Something deeper. My sense of reality. My understanding of how the world worked. "What about Janina?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's a common scheme. They target foreign men. Usually the family is behind it. The girlfriend, the cousin, the aunt. They work together." I thought about Tita Nora's fake heart attack. About Miguel's folders full of lies. About the cousin who'd driven us to the property that first day in his borrowed BMW. Every smile, every touch, every whispered, "I love you" in the darkness. All of it choreographed. All of it designed to separate me from my money. "Can I get it back?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You can file a criminal case," Ati, Reyes said. "But it will take years, maybe 5, maybe 10, and it will cost you more than you have left. The Philippine legal system is slow. These people know how to disappear. What should I do?" He looked at me with something like pity. "Go home. Move on. Don't send any more money." I left his office and walked through the streets of Quiapo in a daze. Vendors called out to me, trying to sell me phone cases and sunglasses and bootleg DVDs. I kept walking. I didn't go back to Janina's apartment. I checked into a cheap hotel in Ermita, the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour, with stained sheets and a broken air conditioner that dripped water onto the tile floor. I didn't answer Janina's calls. She sent me messages, dozens of them over the next 3 days. At first they were angry. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? You can't just abandon me like this." Then they turned, pleading, "Please talk to me. I love you. We can fix this together." Then threatening, "I'll go to the media. I'll tell them how you used me, how you exploited a poor Filipina for sex. Everyone will know what kind of man you are." I deleted every message. I booked a flight home. I packed my suitcase and left the hotel at 4 in the morning and took a taxi to the airport, through streets that were still dark and quiet. At the gate, waiting to board, I turned on my phone one last time. One final message from Janina. "I hate you." I turned the phone off. I got on the plane. I flew home to nothing. Sarah was waiting for me at Heathrow. She didn't say, "I told you so." When she saw me coming through arrivals, she just walked up and hugged me while I cried into her shoulder like a child, right there in the terminal, people flowing around us like we were stones in a river. I had £8,000 left in my account. Everything else was gone. My pension, my savings, the money from selling my flat in Croydon. 40 years of work, of careful planning, of putting money aside for a retirement that was supposed to mean freedom. All of it fed into a lie. I moved back into Sarah's spare room, the wallpaper with the tiny flowers, the single bed, the window that looked out onto her neighbor's fence. I was 67 years old, and I had nothing. I signed up for job seekers allowance at the centre in Watford, sitting in a plastic chair filling out forms while teenagers half my age did the same. I applied for part-time work at the Tesco on the high street, stocking shelves, scanning groceries, minimum wage. The manager who interviewed me was young enough to be my grandson. He asked me why there was a gap in my employment history. I told him I'd been retired. He hired me anyway. Sarah brought me tea in the mornings before I left for my shifts. She sat with me at her kitchen table while I ate toast and stared at nothing. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. My face told her everything. I tried to sleep but couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the property, the empty mud, the rusted rebar, the narrow path between the houses that was supposed to lead to a beach I never saw. I saw Janina's face. I heard her voice. You changed everything. You gave me hope. I wondered how much of it had been real. If any of it had been real. I checked her Facebook profile once, late at night when I couldn't sleep. It was gone. Deleted or blocked. I couldn't tell. I searched for Miguel. Nothing. I found a cached photo from months ago, before I'd even met her in person. Janina at a beach resort somewhere, standing next to a different foreign man, older than me, white-haired, smiling like he'd won the lottery. The caption said, "Blessed and grateful." I closed the laptop. I sat in the darkness of Sarah's spare room and let the weight of it crush me. 40 years, £110,000, my dignity, my future, all of it gone. And for what? For the fantasy that someone young and beautiful could love someone old and ordinary, that I could build something meaningful before I died, that I mattered. 3 months passed like a grey blur. Work, sleep, work, sleep. The same routine every day until the days bled together into one long stretch of numb existence. Then I got an email from Ati Reyes in Manila. Another victim had come forward. Another British man. Another property scheme. Same family. Same story. The lawyer thought we might have a case if we pooled resources. If we could prove a pattern. I stared at the email for an hour before deleting it. What was the point? I was broke. I couldn't afford another flight to Manila. I couldn't afford legal fees. I couldn't afford hope. Barry messaged me on Facebook a few days later. He'd heard what happened through the Expat network. He said there was a support group in London for men who'd been scammed in Southeast Asia. Bar girls, investment schemes, fake businesses, romance cons. Men like me who'd lost everything chasing a dream that was never real. I ignored the message. I didn't want to be part of that group. I didn't want to admit what I was. But the thought stayed with me, growing heavier each day. I wasn't alone. There were others, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, who'd made the same mistakes, who'd believed the same promises, who'd wired their savings to strangers and called it love. It didn't make me feel better. It made me feel worse. I was a statistic, a cliché, the old fool who thought a young Filipina loved him for something other than his wallet. I started going to church on Sundays, not because I'd found God or anything like that, just because it was somewhere to go, somewhere quiet. I sat in the back pew at Street Mary's and listened to hymns I didn't know the words to and let the hours pass. There was a visiting priest from the Philippines, Padre Luis, who noticed me sitting alone week after week. After Mass one Sunday, he asked if I wanted to talk. We sat in his small office that smelled like coffee and old books, and I told him, not everything, but enough. He listened without interrupting, his hands folded on his desk, his face calm. When I finished, he said something I didn't expect. Forgiveness is not for them, it's for you. 6 months after I'd left Manila, Janina messaged me on WhatsApp. I was stocking shelves at Tesco when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost didn't look, but I did. The message was short. I'm sorry. I didn't know what Miguel was doing. I lost money too. I stood there, in the cereal aisle, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. Part of me wanted to believe her. Part of me wanted to call her, to hear her voice, to feel something other than this emptiness that had settled into my bones. But I knew better now. I'd joined Barry's support group. I'd heard the stories. This was the follow-up scam. The fake apology. The setup for another ask. Give it 2 weeks. One of the men had said. She'll tell you she's pregnant, or sick, or in trouble with the police. She'll need money. It's always money. I deleted the message. She sent another one a week later. Please talk to me. I miss you. I deleted that one too. Then another. Why won't you answer me? I thought you loved me. Then they stopped. I dreamed about her sometimes. In the dreams, it was all real. She loved me. Miguel had betrayed both of us. We were sitting on a beach together, holding hands, watching the sunset. I'd wake up alone in Sarah's spare room, the morning sun coming through the curtains, the sound of my grandchildren laughing downstairs. I'd get up, make tea, go to work, scan groceries, smile at customers, come home, eat dinner, watch television, go to bed. The routine swallowed everything, but slowly, something started to shift. The weight got lighter, not gone, never gone, but manageable. I started saving again, £50 a month. It was pathetic compared to what I'd lost, but it was mine. I opened a new bank account that only I could access. Sarah couldn't see it. Janina couldn't touch it. No one could take it from me. I started walking in the mornings before my shift, just 30 minutes around the neighborhood, but it helped. I lost weight. I felt clearer. I thought about Janina less. I thought about what came next more. The letter from Ati Reyes arrived on a Tuesday. The case was moving forward. 2 other victims had joined. They were filing criminal charges against Miguel and Janina. He needed me to provide a witness statement. I sat at Sarah's kitchen table and wrote it all out by hand first, the dates and transfers and lies. Then I typed it up on her computer, my fingers slow on the keyboard. I attached bank statements, screenshots of our messages, photos of the empty property. I read it over 3 times. It was all there. The evidence of my foolishness. But also the evidence of their crime. I sent it. A week later, Barry messaged me. The Philippine National Bureau of Investigation had issued a warrant. Miguel had been arrested. Janina was missing, probably in another province, maybe using another name. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no relief, just a dull ache where the anger used to be. I thought about calling Sarah, telling her the news, but I didn't. It didn't matter. The money wasn't coming back. Miguel would probably post bail and disappear. The system didn't work for people like me. But I'd done it anyway. I'd told the truth. I'd stood up. Maybe that was enough. I went to the support group meeting that week. There were 5 of us in a room above a pub in Hammersmith. All older men, all with similar stories. Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam. Women who'd promised forever and delivered nothing. Investments that evaporated. Businesses that never existed. We talked for 2 hours. We didn't judge each other. We didn't offer solutions. We just listened. One man, a retired electrician from Liverpool named Ron, said something that stuck with me. We're not stupid. We were just human. I thought about that. Maybe it was true. Maybe wanting love, wanting adventure, wanting something more than a quiet retirement watching quiz shows until you died. Maybe that wasn't stupid. Maybe it was just human. And humans make mistakes. Even at 67, I was working my shift at Tesco when I saw them, a Filipino family, tourists by the look of their cameras and shopping bags, asking me where to find the biscuits. I pointed them toward aisle 7 and smiled. The woman thanked me in English with that familiar accent, Cebuano inflected, the vowels soft and round. My chest tightened. I walked away before they could see my face change. I went to the break room and sat down, my hands shaking. I thought I was past this. The triggers, the memories, the sound of an accent that could send me back to that apartment in Bacoor, to that property in Cavite, to the feeling of Janina's head on my chest while she whispered lies in the darkness. But it was still there. Maybe it always would be. I finished my shift. I walked home instead of taking the bus. The November air was cold and damp, the kind of weather that gets into your bones. I thought about warm nights in Manila, about the smell of street food and exhaust fumes and the ocean I never got to see, about the chaos and color and noise. I missed it. Not Janina, not the scam, but the feeling of being somewhere different, somewhere alive. I wondered if I'd ever travel again, if I'd ever trust anyone again, if I'd ever take a risk on anything that mattered. I didn't know. Sarah was making dinner when I got home, shepherd's pie. Her husband asked me about work and I said it was fine. We ate together at the kitchen table, the television on in the background. A quiz show. A question about geography came up, something about the Philippines. Sarah glanced at me. I met her eyes and smiled. It was okay. I was okay. Not healed, not whole, but okay. I went to see Padre Luis after Mass the next Sunday. He made tea in his small office and we talked about forgiveness again. "I'm trying," I said. "That's all anyone can do," he replied. I asked him if I'd ever stop feeling like a fool. He smiled, sad and knowing. The feeling fades. The lesson stays. I thought about that. The lesson. What had I learned? That people lie, that love can be a weapon. That trust is dangerous? Maybe. But also something else. That loneliness makes you vulnerable. That desperation clouds your judgment. That wanting something badly enough can blind you to reality. I'd learned that I wasn't immune to being human. That at 67, I still wanted to be wanted. I still believed in second chances, in fresh starts, in the possibility of something beautiful. And maybe that wasn't foolish. Maybe that was just life. I thanked Padre Luis and left. I walked through the churchyard, past the old gravestones worn smooth by rain, past the bench where I used to sit and check my phone obsessively, waiting for Janina's messages. I didn't sit today. I kept walking. I had a shift at Tesco in an hour. I had £340 saved in my new account. I had dinner plans with Sarah and her family tomorrow. I had a life. It was smaller than the one I'd imagined. But it was mine, and no one could take it from me. The final email, from Atty. Reyes, came on a grey morning in March, exactly 1 year after I'd first landed in Manila with my architectural plans and my cashier's check and my hope. The case had been dropped. Insufficient evidence. Miguel had posted bail and vanished. Janina was never formally charged. It was over. I deleted the email without responding. There was nothing to say. I'd known this was how it would end. I'd made my peace with it. That evening I was scanning groceries on the late shift when a couple came through my line. An older white man, maybe 70, with white hair and age spots on his hands, and a young Filipina woman, beautiful, maybe 30, holding his arm and smiling. He was buying flowers, wine, chocolates. He looked happy, genuinely happy, like he'd won something. I wanted to say something. I wanted to lean across the scanner and tell him to be careful, to verify everything, to use a lawyer, to protect himself. But I didn't. Maybe she was real. Maybe they were in love. Maybe it would work out for them in ways it hadn't worked out for me. Or maybe, in 6 months, he'd be standing where I was standing now. Broke. Ashamed. Scanning groceries for minimum wage while his dreams rotted in Philippine mud. I didn't know. It wasn't my place to know. I rang up the flowers. I smiled. I said, "Have a lovely evening." The couple left, her laughter trailing behind them like music. I finished my shift. I clocked out. I walked home through the streets of Watford as the streetlights flickered on one by one. The city hummed around me, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere in the Philippines, Janina was probably sitting across from another man, another foreigner with savings and loneliness and hope. She was probably smiling, touching his hand, making promises about beachfront cottages and forever. Somewhere, Miguel was probably staking out another empty plot of land, printing more fake permits, preparing another folder full of lies. The world kept turning. People kept lying. People kept believing. And me? I was still here, still standing, still breathing. I'd lost £220,000. I'd lost my retirement. I'd lost my pride and my dreams and the fantasy that I mattered to someone young and beautiful. But I hadn't lost everything. I'd learned. I'd survived. I was still capable of getting up every morning and going to work and putting one foot in front of the other. I could still smile at strangers. I could still feel the cold air on my face and know I was alive. Maybe, in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. Not justice, not revenge, not even recovery, just survival, just standing, just being here when the lights came on and the day began again. I unlocked the door to Sarah's house. I could hear the television inside, voices and laughter. I took off my coat. I went inside. Tomorrow I'd wake up and do it all again. And the day after that. And the day after that. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was the life I had, and I was still learning how to live it.